Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a realm where reality intertwines with the inexplicable, where the boundaries of reason dissolve into the shadows of uncertainty. Welcome to the political twilight zone. I am your guide through this enigmatic labyrinth, where politics and power take on life of their own. In this dimension, the threads of truth weave a tapestry of intrigue, challenging our perception of the world we thought we knew. In this world, nothing is as it seems, and the truth lies buried beneath layers of deceit. Prepare to venture where reason meets the unexplained, and where the unexplained might just be.
Hey, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us again here this week. This is Rick Wagner getting it right on Kansas City KGLN and on the Internet and a few other places. And you can always listen to our podcast. We've been getting a lot of people listening to the podcast, which are, at this point, pretty much the shows boiled down. But I have been threatening to do some other things because there's so many things happening. So you might check once in a while if there might. I think we're going to start doing something a little bit more than just the shows for the podcast, but we appreciate you guys tuning in on them or sending them to people or whatever is happening. So, and here it is, after Memorial Day. Of course, we had with remembrance of D-Day, which we were embarrassed, I thought, pretty thoroughly by our president over there. Also, I don't know what he's thinking about, talking about trying to pick a fight with the Russians on the D-Day memorial. It's just, I don't know who's advising him, or if he's getting advice, if it's from a real person, or if it's one of his imaginary friends. But it's not a good look over there. But certainly is worth remembering for us. It was the 80th anniversary of D-Day on Omaha Beach, Sword Beach, Juno Beach, and it's something to remember. I have mixed emotions about it myself, is because I always feel like that it's very proud feeling to think about what we and our allies did. We had to remember that a lot of folks, Canadians especially, others that had hit those beaches. Heck, we had Polish military in there. We had some French. We had just pretty much everybody. And it was an amazing operation. And every time I read about it, I'm more surprised and proud that it was able to be pulled off. And it was pulled off with some inevitable mistakes. War is planned only until it starts. Then as soon as it starts, the plan goes sideways. Many of you know that a lot of the paratroopers that were dropped behind the beach emplacements, landed in places that were a little further away than they were supposed to be. The gliders had some real problems when they sent them in. There was a lot of people that had to just pick up and do the job differently than they thought they were going to. And there was a lot on the line. The sort of sad part for me is every time lately, last couple of years, is I wonder if we have the wherewithal or the grit, really, to do that kind of thing again. By that, I mean the leadership. And as it stands right now, I'm very cynical about it, I think would be the way. So hopefully we'll get some change coming up here in a few months that will, any change practically from what we're doing now is going to be for the better unless it's more of the same. So I'm optimistic for that. And I know you guys are working hard out there. We have to. America's on the line every time we vote. That's something that is so true. And we keep talking about, elections being this is the most important. Well, I don't even have to tell you that if you look at this one, see how important it is. Anyway, I wanted to bring to your attention a couple of things that I thought was kind of interesting, because, all of this week and everything was talking about artificial intelligence, which I'm in favor of for certain people, and I found something really kind of interesting, and maybe it's my background that really, drew my eye to it. But a lot of police agencies are starting to use drones to answer calls. And here in Colorado, there are several of them that are going to start using drones more. And I think one of them, if I remember, is Commerce City at some point is going to try and use them to be first response on some 9/11 calls. Now, the drones we're talking about are not, regular drones. It's not like Anthony Blinken is going to come flying over your house. That's a big drone, but it's not what we're talking about. Obviously, these drones are capable of imaging, capable of sound recording or whatever you may be. I'm a little confused, or rather intrigued, I guess, by how you would use one of these drones to answer a 911 call. I see clearly how you could use one in response so that officers responding to that call would have a better idea of what was going on before they got there. That seems to me an excellent use of them. I don't know how you would use them as the primary touchstone in a 911 call. I have a hard time imagining a drone lowering itself down and you talking to it about what's going on. I suppose that's possible, but it seems a little odd. And I don't know. It hasn't been clear to me about how they want to use them in that situation. And the drones themselves, right now have pilots. You have to be able to pilot remotely. We use a lot of the Predator drones and so forth. Now, these are much different drones than we're talking about for law enforcement, but where people were at Air Force Base in, let's say, I know there was some Air Force Base in Nevada that were operating drones over the battlefield in Iraq and some in Afghanistan. That's pretty crazy. I mean, that's the real sci-fi stuff. The drones they're using here will also be remotely piloted, and decisions will be made by real people. We all worry that we're going to let machines start making too many decisions, but I don't think that's going to happen for a while. But the scope of this is very interesting. I mean, they think it's going to be a money saver, and I don't want to be a doubting Thomas here, but I don't know. Drones are not that tough to bring down. I mean, and are we going to attach a criminal violation beyond, let's say, criminal mischief to just shooting down a drone or hitting it with a brick or whatever the case may be? I don't know. I think that's going to be something we're going to have to look at too. Are we going to make it a more serious crime to destroy a law enforcement drone? Otherwise, how do you keep people from, throwing a rock out of the drone and knocking it out of the air a little bit and then taking off or something? I'm sure there are some thoughts on that. I have seen some things about equipping the drones with non-lethal force, like a taser or something like that. I don't think that's going to happen for a long time. Just too many possibilities to have a problem with that. But I think it's interesting. We have to use technology to improve what we do, augment what we do, but not as a substitute for what we do as people. That's the only thing I get a little concerned about, is everybody's shorthanded. Everybody's trying to fill positions. They can't get enough of them. And the idea to lean on electronics, to lean on robotics, things like that, just feels more and more enticing when you're in that kind of situation. We've certainly seen that in the case of fast food restaurants. Many of you know that if some of the fast food restaurants you go to now, the first place you stop most of the time is not to order from a person, but from a kiosk, touchscreen. I actually prefer that sometimes because I have the palate of a 12-year-old in that I don't like a lot of things, and so I like to be able to order my hamburger without onions and stuff like that and have it written down someplace. And so lots of times I think that there are some advantages to that. But it still is a direction we're going. And I think that whole feeling that you get that we're starting to substitute people for electronics and cases machinery is just fine so long as we keep the critical decision making to a real person. Now, I will say that we have some real people involved in government that I don't think should be making any decisions, and probably your pocket calculator would make a better decision than they do on almost everything. But in general, I don't you want to see that removed. You don't want to have that humanity removed. We're not exactly sure how artificial intelligence can do with situations involving people's reactions or actions and how it would be supposed to respond to them. I think that's ways down the road here. But it certainly can augment it. It certainly can help us. It's certainly going to make our lives easier, but we don't want to have it make our lives controlled by some way. And which makes me think that next segment I'm trying to bring up here, something in Colorado again, the Colorado Excel, good old Excel, which is provider of power for much of Colorado, not all, obviously, has a new plan to make things better. Yeah, right. Hi, folks. Thanks for sticking around. We appreciate it, and I especially appreciate it because I appreciate anybody that listens to me, so thanks a lot. And I wanted to switch topics a little bit here in this segment and go from, the last thing we were talking about in the first segment was the use of drones in law enforcement, and drones lead you to what goes on in government because it's mainly run by drones. And so it kind of fits in here. And what we have is Trish Weber here, who is very involved in a lot of these discussions about children and some of these issues that have come up about schools and getting information and so forth. And there's a couple of initiatives out there that are trying to get on the ballot. And I wanted Trish to come on and talk about them a little bit just to make sure you knew about them and that you sign up so that they get on the ballot because it's a lot of signatures to collect. And these guys aren't, being paid by some big fund out of state to pay people to go around and collect signatures. So, we need to be proactive on this. So, Trish, thanks for joining us here today.
Thanks, Rick. Glad to be here.
Yes, and the two measures essentially, and now you talk about them a bit more. One is about keeping parents informed about what happens with their children when they're expressing psychological problems or psychological confusion or whatever the case may be. In particular about gender dysphoria or whatever you want to call it. And you want to make sure that the school administration is contacting the parents so they know what's going on. Is that right?
Right. There are two initiatives which I'm talking about today. They're common sense ballot initiatives, and the first one just simply requires a school to notify a parent within 48 hours if their child is having mental challenges regarding their gender. It's just to help keep parents informed so they can help their children, navigate these difficult issues. And parents are the best at making sure that their child's well-being is taken care of, and this ballot initiative will help them do that because there are forces out there that want to exclude the parent in these decisions.
Well, that's always used to think that parents, had their children's best interest at heart, but it doesn't appear to be the thinking now amongst some. Children should be raised by, the community, or as I think Hillary said, the village. And we should all live in a village, instead of a town, because we aren't supposed to travel very much. Small village in a hut, I think. But, so you're trying to make sure that, put it into law, that when people are expressing some of these difficulties to counselors at school or teachers or whatever, that the parent is informed so they can do whatever they think is necessary with their own child, right?
Right.
And the fact that we have to have that, we have to force them to do that, is a very troubling thing.
Right. And, you have the parents raising these children for a reason, and you want them to be involved for most things. So why would you not want them involved in these very important issues?
Well, once again, I think you've crossed a bridge too far for some of these people. I don't think they want the parents involved in most things. I think the child needs to come to the school and they do whatever they need to do, and then, you have the result. I mean, it sounds crazy, but that certainly seems to the logic when you listen to some of these arguments. So, yeah, I guess we have to force them legislatively. And, of course, the fact that you said that it was common sense, that, of course, explains why the legislature didn't pass it itself, because that would be an anathema to them. So, we'll have to do it ourselves. And we have to get a lot of signatures, I think 125,000 for each one of these. And the second one is about Title IX situation, sports for girls, right?
Right. It's about keeping girls' sports for girls. It's imperative that we have a safe environment for girls to participate in athletics so they aren't injured. And also, we need to safeguard their right to play in a fair and environment where there's no bias and where they can compete. I know growing up in high school, there was a girl who wanted to play basketball, and she was the only girl on the boys' team, and she sat on the bench 99% of the time.
Well, that's sexism, of course. We all know that's what that is. This is the problem, is that merit and ability relative to the other players is not what we're looking at anymore. And it doesn't mean someone's not great. It just means that sometimes there's some biological issues that make you more able to be competitive. You're bigger, you're stronger, whatever the case may be. And, if you wait till you're, like I think I've said, you're 16 to quote, transition, a lot of guys are pretty good sized when they're 16. And, growing their hair out and then changing their name does not mean that they've given up some of those physical advantages in strength and bone density and stuff like that. So
it would also make it unfair for scholarship awards for girls and their participation in college athletics. So
obviously, and the Biden administration is going after this by trying to change Title IX to include people who have transitioned. That seems to me to be working against the interest of the idea behind Title IX to make women's sports on an equal footing with men. That seems to be wrong-headed. And once again, if we ask the average guys out there listening right now in 2001 about any of these topics and ask them if we thought we need a law to make this happen or not happen, they would not think that they were crazy. Like, why would you? Everybody agrees with that. Well, look how fast that's changed. And you just get ran over if you're not careful. And having these ballot initiatives from the people to make sure that a bunch of harebrained ideas coming out of the legislature that read the newspapers from the East Coast and decide they want to be like that from affecting our lives. We want to keep things what seem to be normal. I don't want a new normal.
Right.
I don't like the sound of that. The new normal. I mean, I understand that happens, but it's not my favorite way to do things. So now they're going to be collecting signatures, and where can they go to check this out and maybe even get a petition and collect signatures themselves?
Protect Kids Colorado is working on these initiatives, and they have a website. It's just protectkidscolorado.org, and you can go and read more about these ballot initiatives on their website. They are also looking for donations because it does cost money to get these petitions printed. They're also looking for more volunteers if someone wants to collect signatures, and you will find more information there. So protectkidscolorado.org.
And I think it's important that one piece that Trish brought up there is that you can get a petition and get some signatures yourself. And you don't have to stand out all day and get 200 of them. You can get 20 of them from people in your neighborhood or folks you know. And then all of those are put into the pot and to get to the amount they need. And they're going to need probably a couple 100,000 signatures because the people who don't like this are going to go hammer and tongs through these signatures to try and exclude them so that they don't have enough to make it on the ballot. That incorrect something or rather, the address isn't right, they're not a Colorado resident, who knows what they say. So you've got to have a pretty good buffer to do that with. So you have to collect a lot of signatures, and it's hard to do if you're not paying people to go out and do this stuff. So, if you have some time, you can go to that website, Protect Kids. That's Protect Kids Colorado. Is that what it is?
protectkidscolorado.org.
Yeah,
that's right.
I only didn't want to give the wrong one. And get some information and maybe get a petition, and get some signatures collected and send it in yourself. And just be very careful.
And be on the
that you're doing it correctly, so they don't knock off some of your signatures.
That's right, and don't be intimidated. It's one person has to oversee each petition. There's about 80 signatures per petition. And you just tell people, they have to print except where they sign their signature, and they have to be a registered voter in Colorado. And they can only sign one petition one time. So you don't want to sign this petition, for instance, with me, and then go sign the same petition with somebody else. Right. So if you've signed it once, that's the limit.
You can sign another petition for a different initiative. It doesn't stop for that. You just can't sign the same one twice because you'll end up not having it counted at all. So you want to make sure that you don't get caught doing that in the sense that you're not paying full attention. And since there's two of these, you might forget that you've signed one already, and then you go ahead and sign it again. So that's something that we have to think on because we're really up against a very there's a very concerted effort to, if these signatures get past the threshold, to try and get them knocked down so that it doesn't appear on the ballot. I mean, that's the easiest way to beat something like this, is just keep it from being voted on.
And these ballot initiatives, these petitions are all over the state. So if you're in Denver and somebody asks you to sign one and you haven't signed one, you can sign it over there. Or somebody from Denver's over here, they can sign it. As long as they don't sign the same issue twice.
Right, as we were saying. Now, when do these signatures have to be turned in?
They have to be turned in. We're going to collect them until the end of July. They have to be turned in early August. There was some trouble. You have to make sure there's only one topic per ballot initiative and the language is clear. And so the people who were putting these together kept getting challenged by the title board, who make sure that these pass the parameters that are required.
Single issue.
Right. So it took a while, which limited the ability of us to circulate these.
I think I'm going to have to cut you off here because we're running out of time. So
okay.
I'll talk to you a little bit more about it. Thanks a lot. Okay. All right, folks, welcome back. Yeah, I mean, I was getting kind of depressed reading through the ballot initiatives that we even have to have these things. I mean, think about that. We're not having to go back in ancient times or even back in the 1920s or something like that. We go back to like 2000 perhaps, way back there at the turn of the century. And if you talked about, well, we think we want to keep, biological males, people who, have grown up as men, even though they transition late in life, out of girl sports, that wouldn't be controversial, I don't think. Maybe a few people, but it wouldn't really be controversial. Douglas Murray brings that up a lot. He said how strange it is that we have such intense and aggressive arguments from the left, especially over things that nobody thought was a problem 20 years ago, 10 years ago, some of them 5 years ago. And all of a sudden it's an emergency. And, of course, we also let this stuff get blown out of proportion with the rhetoric. I mean, it's if you tell people that words themselves are violence, and that if you express certain views that are counter to whatever's the view of the moment, without even expressing any violence towards the person, they can interpret that as dangerous to them. And so when you allow people to think that way, then what happens? Then they feel as they're justified in their own mind, some of them it's a little unstable anyway, to lash out. I mean, how can that not be the case? How can that not happen? Of course it happens. I mean, why are we having to have an initiative? And don't get me wrong, we need to have it, so let's get it signed up, but so that parents are informed about the behavior of their students. One of the things that people who want to keep that secret in the schools, if they start talking about gender changing or whatever the case may be, will say things like, well, it'll put the child in danger. Okay, you mean from their parents? And that's what they really mean. They think, oh, the terrible, parents out there that are all, strict and authoritarian, and if they hear this out, they'll put okay, maybe there is one or two out there, don't know. But there's a lot of things, like the child's grades, that can cause people to have problems in their family. Other behaviors of school. So if you take that as a definition, then really what you want to do is when your child, gets on the school bus or walks through those doors, it's a mystery. You don't get to know anything. They come home, if they don't tell you, you don't find out. I mean, that's where that road kind of logically leads, if that's going to be your basis for withholding that information. And then the idea that, like we talked about in the last segment, if you let someone that's gone through, a significant part of their puberty, especially as a male, and they're just not going to be comparable to a female of the same age. I mean, they're going to be thicker boned, they're going to have more bone density, they're going to have more musculature, they're going to have all that stuff, like we said. And so how is that fair? And I can't imagine someone that has a very talented daughter that really wants to, excel in some sport. Swimming always leaps to mind, but in track and field, you name it. Now, track and field seems to be getting taken over now, at least what we see. And they would go through their significant part of their lives, training for something, learning how to do it really well, when they're young, you as parents spend all your time driving them to lessons and paying for this and paying for that. And then they get in a situation of competition where they can show off that all that hard work, and they're put on a very uneven playing field. And if they're trying to get a scholarship, this can be a real problem. And there's been several instances where, because of a biological male being ahead in, say, a swimming contest or a track and field, that a female is pushed out of the running for a scholarship. And that just doesn't seem, I don't want to say doesn't seem right to me. It's just not right. And the changes in Title IX, which is the legislation we have to try and make the money that's expended and so forth equal between men's sports and women's sports, to start allowing this very vague definitions of who can participate, just really undermines it. And I think for the support of everybody out there that wants to see meritocracy, then I think that this is something we're going to have to do. I hate to think that we have to write that into the laws. What's next? What today do we think there's no argument about that in 3 years we'll be fighting viciously about it back and forth? I don't know what it might be, but I'm sure some things out there. We see the firearms arguments that come back to the legislature every year. Now, our legislature meets for 120 days. They should be reduced to about 20 days, and I think that would cause much less mischief. And they go every year. Some legislatures, Texas, for instance, meets every other year for like 90 days. There's been talk about limiting our session for 90 days, which that's a step in the right direction, because they just fill it up. And also, a lot of these things that end up passing as laws, if you notice, they are put on and rear their heads for their final votes towards the end of the legislative session. It's sort of how, your city council decides to talk about something that's controversial at the very end of the meeting, at 11:30. Yeah, that's what they're doing. And these things are just floating through, and then we talk about them and say, well, how'd that happen? Well, we're on the topic of worrying about what they can try and make us do. I have an interesting story here for you. Once again, it's a Colorado story, and let's see, it's a story, and I got this from a couple of different sources. Denver 7 News, and I think the Post had something on it, but I just took some notes here. That if you have a smart meter on your electrical box, now a smart meter, remember, as we've talked about before, is a meter that records the timing of your usage and some other things too. So because of that, if you have a smart meter, and by the way, I looked up here that something like out of 1.6 million customers, that Excel says that they have 1.2 million smart meters. Now remember, they got that by sending you this note. I know I got one that said, if you let us put a smart meter on your house, we'll give you, was it $50, something like that, against your next bill. So I think people said, oh yeah, well, smart meter, that sounds good. Well, of course, it's letting your temperature, your environment, be controlled by some agency. And now, not only do you have that issue, because remember that happened in Aurora last year, where they, slowed down the provision of power because they were having sort of some problems providing all of it, because we won't build any power plants. We just make everything electric and then leave the same old amount of power plants there, which, once again, that's a little bit like argument about, the men and women's sports, is that how is that not something you just fix that you can't figure out? But now what they want to do is do what's called, the time of use pricing. Now, we already have 2 levels of pricing that I've complained about for a long time on here, because it's sneaky the way they did it. It's in there now, your bill. Now, you are, with natural gas, for instance, you have a certain amount that is delivered to your home at a certain price. When you start going above that amount, the rate, I think, doubles on the amount of energy that you're paying for. In other words, it goes up twice as much when you're just using more. And the way they got around, and this, I hear people tell me this, say, well, if you use more, you should pay more. that's not what's happening. If you're using more, you're paying more and paying more on top of that. An example I always use, and you guys probably heard me use it before, is it would be like if I said, and this people wouldn't stand for this, if I said, we think that you should only use 100 gallons of gas a month. So you're going to pay $3.50 a gallon for gas. But after 100 gallons, you're going to pay $7 a gallon. Because that's the same thing that's happening now. If that was happening, do you think people would pay attention to that? Yeah, I think so. But see, this is slid in, and they had this whole, if you use more, you pay more. Yeah, that's not the whole story here. This is going to make it even worse. They're going to have these time of use. What they're hoping to do is, let me see what the kilowatt hours here. If you're using it on their high peak times, which I think is like 3 to 7 during the week in the summer with all the air conditioning, that's, if you look, usually your hottest time of the day is right there, headed into the evening, like 3, 4, right in there. And if you do that, and this energy is put into use, and they say they're going to start doing it, I think Monday. I guess we'll find out. Like you might go up, say, from 12 cents per kilowatt hour to 32 cents per kilowatt hour. Okay. That seems like quite a bit. That's almost 3 times. And if you're at mid-peak hours, you see, that's like 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., it goes up from 12 cents per kilowatt hour to 22 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, they think this is great. They want to keep the energy use down from the peak demand. Why is that? Why are we limiting our lives, folks? Because that's what's happening. We're going backward. This is retrograde living. And they keep talking about how they want to, keep our energy consumption down. Why? I'm not just going to give in to that and say, oh yeah, energy consumption, we should keep it down. I don't think so. I think we've got to be able to use as much energy as we want. We should be using more of it. We should be using energy to do all sorts of things. I want a robot mowing my lawn. I want to use energy for that. Who knows? I don't want to be told that I'm using too much energy. And why am I using, quote, too much energy? Because they have to build some kind of generating facility. And it's usually going to be coal. That's what most of them are now. They're closing them down. Natural gas, which can be a very clean and efficient way to generate electricity. Of course, it's hydroelectric. There's even some tidal generators. And then the best way to just generate electricity is probably through nuclear. But they don't want to do any of those things. None of them. What they want to do is create more electrical demand by requiring things to be more electric, like cars and lawnmowers and all these kinds of things. And like in California, where they've gotten rid of, and I think it's going to the motion to come in some other states as well, I think maybe here, to get rid of gas-powered weed eaters, leaf blowers, stuff like that. So they don't want any more energy. They just want to curtail the way you use energy. It's the same reason they're not too upset about the distance you can drive an electric car. You shouldn't be driving around anyway. You should be living in a village where you walk to or ride your bicycle to the store, and you take your burlap bag inside and buy whatever you're buying, and then you trudge on back to your hut. That's what they're supposed to be. They see people doing. So when you say, people don't go very far. Yeah, they don't care. Now they can go far because they're very important people. They're like John Kerry. They need to be able to travel around and spread the word. A little bit like Johnny Appleseed, traveling around, throwing the seeds out for apple trees, wearing like a bucket over his head. That old thing. Now, that's important work to go around and try and talk about climate change, and to make sure that everything that happens is attributed to climate change. By the way, as you know, the migration across the border is by many people on the progressive side. It's because of climate change. Really, the climate's changing in Central America, and that's why they're coming here? I think the political climate has changed in America, and that's why they're coming here. So, you're half right. You're just talking about a different kind of climate. But yeah, that's underlining everything. And it's used as an excuse to do everything. It's used as an excuse not to build power plants because they might contribute to global warming. It's an excuse not to build, of course, cars with internal combustion engines, or you out there with a Briggs & Stratton motor, trying to mow your lawn. And that's obviously, you hate the planet if you're doing that. Those kinds of things are they're given for some of these people. And once again, we don't think about it that way. So until it's regulated or taxed or gone, it doesn't occur to us that someone is thinking about it so differently than we are. I want to see more energy generated. I want to keep the environment great too. I mean, I live in the environment. So do you. Who wants to say, yeah, I'd like to have more smog. I'd like to have, a dirtier place to live. No, people don't do that. If they want more energy, they want to have it generated in as clean a way as possible. And we're capable of doing that without being mandated by the government. I mean, inventions don't come by mandate. The government didn't say to Edison and Tesla and those guys, well, we need an electric light bulb, and we're gonna fund it, and we need to have it by 2 years from now. That's not how that works. First of all, the old saw about necessity being the mother of invention is very true, because if there's something that's a problem, you keep trying to work on a way to make it less of a problem. If there's something that people really want that you could sell to them, then we have what we like to call capitalism, in the sense that you give people something that they want, they'll buy it from you. That's how things come online, not through government mandates. We can tell it with the solar industry. It's just fine for some uses, but if you're trying to push it on everybody through tax credits or subsidies or Lord knows what will come next, it's not ready for that yet. Technology's improving, but it's not there yet. It's used for, there are many things it can be useful for, but not some of the things they're trying to force it into. I mean, you don't generate a terrific amount of energy from these solar farms. And many of the solar farms, by the way, also have a generator in them, because if it's nighttime or it hasn't been sunny for a while, they still need to deliver power. And it's not necessarily something that you can predict when the sun's shining. Some places, obviously, the sun shines a lot more. Now, you're not going to have a big solar farm probably in Eugene, Oregon. It's going to be tough. But you might have a rain panel, I guess, and turn a water wheel. That might be a good way to do it. But the other stuff, you're not. And so if you're going to mandate one, you think you have to supply the other. If you're going to mandate electrical products, you should try and supply electricity. Not so fast. So that's what we see here with this rate pricing. Now, why are we getting priced differently? Are they going to take that extra money and build more power plants? I looked all around to see if that was what. No. I didn't see anything about that. They don't seem to be interested in building more power plants. They want to use the money as efficiently and effectively as possible. That's what you always hear. And they want to have this different pricing so that you understand your energy use a little bit more. Really? I mean, if you think your dad was a problem going around and turning the lights off before, when they start doing this tiered pricing on energy, you're going to be sitting in the dark at 4 p.m. And you don't get to open the refrigerator until after 7. And the air conditioner is going to be at 76 instead of 74. All because of things like this. And that's exactly what they want to do. And they think the easiest way to do it, of course, is through financial disincentives, really. You're disincentivized to use power through this because you're having to pay more for it. Also, it's retroactive. It is a tax, essentially. They don't put it as one, but it's a rate, so they don't have to. Then there's no Tabor argument, as they like to say on it. But if you have a rate like this, and people who have less money are going to be more negatively affected by it than those that make more money. So it's a regressive tax. That's what it's called, where it's evenly applied in such a way that it doesn't differentiate with income levels. And it shouldn't. I mean, what's next? You have to submit your income level to Excel so you can see if they're going to charge you something. That's not what we want. But that's what kind of tax it is. It's a regressive tax. It's like raising the tax on gasoline. Everybody needs gasoline, pretty much. I mean, some of you Tesla drivers out there and stuff don't, but in a sense, you need energy from that because you're generating it somewhere. But as you move through this, you see that these kinds of taxes really harm individuals who are, trying to make a living in the trades, especially. Victor Davis Hanson talks a lot about in California about when the gasoline got so high and the diesel got so high, and there's a lot of people around him in farms and that do landscaping and things like that. They have bigger vehicles. They're towing equipment. They're driving long distances. They're driving every day. And the idea of filling up that tank costing you another 30% than it did the year before, that can be most of your profit. Matter of fact, it can put you into the I'm paying them to let me work thing. So it's a disincentive to people who actually travel around. Now, if you work from home and you write software for, Google and, you once in a while you leave to go to the store to buy some organic food and then you ride your bicycle back home and then, But that's not the way most people live. And we cannot forget the rest of the population out there just to make a few people who don't really know what they're talking about feel good. Because that's what's happening. So I just want to encourage you guys to really examine this stuff. And examine when we're looking at these primaries coming up, examine these, examine them to see if you agree with what this person is doing. Okay? And if they are someone you agree with, then vote for them. But don't be taken in by advertising. There's a lot of advertising that's going on out there that is funded by liberals trying to vote for somebody that they think they can beat easier. So they're trying to confuse everybody, cause trouble, and they're going to. They're going to try to get you to vote in a way that helps them, or they imagine they do. Sometimes they're wrong, but I, for one, don't have any intention of letting liberal Democrats or progressives choose my candidates, and that's kind of what they try and do. So make sure you're knowledgeable enough about the candidates out there so that you know who to vote for, and don't let them just run a few commercials pretending to be conservatives to try and change your vote.
Thanks for listening. Listen, if you'd like to listen to more and you want to maybe perhaps have someone else listen to our podcast, you can do so either by going right to our webpage, politicalviking.com, or therickWagnerShow.com. Both of them will take you there. You can get links right directly to our podcast, or you can hear our podcast on Podbean, on iTunes, and Spotify, and a couple others. So you can find us. We appreciate it if you do. And if you've heard the show, you want somebody else to hear it, that's a good way to send it to them. Thanks for listening.